Good evening and welcome everyone to Growing the Library Workers Movement, hosted tonight by AFSCME Council 31. My name is Jane. I'm going to be your moderator tonight. My pronouns are she, her. I am a labor economist for the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And what I do through my role with AFSCME is I work and advocate for the working lives of library workers. I'm a former public librarian myself. I worked in a variety of libraries, both at the circulation desk, in acquisitions, working with the teens, and now I get to use my passion for libraries and library workers to make sure that the people who run those institutions have good working conditions and great wages and benefits. We will be recording tonight's session for future use, just FYI, but please know that the recording are only going to record the panelists and the presenters and will not show the participants, their names, or the chat. So tonight we're going to be hearing from some amazing members from the state of Illinois and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are also going to hear from an AFSCME lobbyist on funding updates. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity for us to answer some questions from the registration, and then that came up in the chat. So I want to introduce AFSCME and Cultural Workers United to all of you. Cultural Workers United is AFSCME's campaign that supports library and museum workers. AFSCME represents over 300 libraries across the United States and 25,000 library workers. AFSCME is the union for cultural workers, and we represent more library workers than any other union in the United States. 2,500 of those libraries are from the state of Illinois, represented at libraries like the Chicago Public Library, the State Library of Illinois, and the Aurora Public Library, and many other libraries throughout the entire state. AFSCME library workers have seen an immense improvement in their wage. Here are more libraries from across the country that we also represent, in addition to Chicago and Aurora and Oak Lawn and Homewood and Burlington, and I can just keep naming them all night. But back to my point is that AFSCME library workers have seen an immense improvement in their wages and benefits. In the state of Illinois alone, AFSCME represented libraries invest 51% more in library worker salaries and 114% more in benefits. The union difference is real, and it's huge, and it's large, and people feel it every single day. And the difference between a union library and a non-union library is huge. And we're going to talk more about that tonight. And so our panel tonight will be sharing their experiences of organizing, how they support their members, and how working in a unionized library is different from being in a non-union library. As our three panelists, who can turn their videos on now, share their experiences tonight, please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we can answer those throughout tonight. So first, I would like our three panelists to introduce themselves. Give us your name, your pronouns, where you work and what you do, and either give us some insight into why you decided to work in libraries or why you decided to get involved in your union local. So John, do you want to lead us off tonight?
Sure. My name is John Rayburn. I am the supervising clerk at the Carter G. Woodson Regional Library at the Chicago Public Library. I am also the president of Local 1215 and also sit on the executive board for Council 31. I started out as a library page back in 1983, so I've been working for the library for now going on to 28 years. I've worked my way up from a library page up into a supervising clerk. And then when I started as a page, I also was a steward, and I worked my way up into the president of Local 1215.
Great. Thank you, John. I'm so glad that you are here with us tonight with all of your immense years of experience with the Chicago Public Library. Next, I want to introduce another Illinois library worker, Mimi Davis. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey, Mimi Davis, she, her. I am from the Bloomington Public Library in the Bloomington, Illinois. I'm an adult services librarian, but I've also been, I worked my way up to be a librarian. I started as an assistant. I've always been a union member when I've worked at libraries that were lucky enough to have a union, and I think it's so important. And a lot of you don't know this, but before when we were all practicing, we found out that John, Kelly, and I all had very interesting lives, and none of us ever grew up thinking we're going to work in libraries. But all of us did, and all of us also really enjoy where we ended up. It was one of those happy accidents. I work. Bloomington, Illinois, is a kind of a smaller area. We're not by Chicago. For anyone watching who doesn't know where we are, we're in the middle of the state, and I'm just so happy to be here. Thanks.
We're happy to have you too, Mimi. And it is a happy little accident, quoting Bob Ross, that we all ended up in libraries. And I think your communities are definitely luckier off that you did. And so our next panelist is visiting us tonight from Massachusetts. And so I want to have Kelly introduce herself to everyone.
Thank you, Jane. And Mimi's absolutely right. This is my third library job, and I just sort of backed into it the way that it's a thing that happens. So anyway, I'm Kelly Hopkins, and I work at the MIT libraries, which is fairly recently unionized with AFSCME. And my pronouns are she, hers. I work, I'm not a front-facing staffer, so I'm not somebody you're going to see behind the desk. I work in the office of the director, and I support our research program that is currently sort of standing up in the libraries. And I also support our collections department. So I do a lot of physical work, finance stuff to help pay for books that are being acquired, things like that. The things that help make the library run, but you don't necessarily see happening when you walk through the front door. So exciting.
Yeah, I think that's such an important distinction. So often when people who aren't in library world every day, they think that everyone is a librarian, but it takes all types and all people to make that library work. We're not all big L librarians, but we are all library workers. So my first question that I want to ask and have all three of you give us some insight on tonight is, why should library workers organize a union? And since Kelly, you are part of one of our newest union locals, why don't you start us off?
I can absolutely do that. That's a great question, and I have a good answer for it because we just did this. We had a lot of sort of bread and butter reasons for doing so, and I think it resonates with a lot of people. Libraries provide vital community services, and in my particular instance, our community at MIT is global. So we are working with people from all around the world. We have students on campus, we have students everywhere, we have researchers who are reaching out to us from every corner of the globe. And we need to be able to assist those people with their needs, their research needs, and even just their I need a novel needs. Everything in that realm is important. And in order to be able to do that, we need to have appropriate compensation. We need to have safe working conditions. We need to be able to have a voice when talking to the folks who are making decisions about how our work gets done. And we need to be able to work in an environment where we don't have people concerned about whether or not they're going to get fired because of the color of their skin, because of who they love, or any of the other sorts of sort of systemic concerns that you find in a lot of workplaces. And so we wound up unionizing, not only because we wanted better pay and not only because we wanted better benefits, but because we wanted a safer, healthier, and not just physically healthier, emotionally healthier workplace for everybody. And because AFSCME has so many libraries around the country, ultimately that's why we went with AFSCME.
Thanks for sharing that, Kelly. And I think you made that excellent point there, is that, yeah, unions improve our wages and improve our benefits, but AFSCME is able to improve your entire working life, and that bleeds into your
Mhm.
personal life too. And so it is able to just
Yes.
completely change the game. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Mimi,
It's been work, but it's been great.
the hard work is the good work. So Mimi, would you like to share why library workers should organize a union?
Sure. I think that now more than ever, I think the time is now. If this is something that people have been thinking about, that everyone knows that budgets are tight, and especially coming out of a pandemic, and so many city and government budgets have been really hard hit affected by the pandemic. We all know that the most beloved institutions, the cultural institutions, the libraries, the zoos, the museums, they are the first ones that municipalities look at when budgets are cut. That's who needs to go. There's so many cities struggling with that, and there's been lots of articles in Library Journal about reductions in hours, layoffs, and cuts have already started at libraries all over the country, and also museums as well. So that's something to think about. Even if someone says, "Oh, my manager would never put up with that," your contract is what stands up for that, not a person. People can come and go, but your contract is what protects you on the job. Your contract is what protects you and your coworkers, so you don't lose your hours, you don't lose your benefits. And when cities are going to have to start making tough decisions, ultimately that contract is what's going to protect you, not your manager, no matter what their good intentions are. They can't beat a contract anytime.
That's such an excellent point. Because I mean, I'm sure as all of us have experienced, we can have a good manager today, but what about
Yeah.
tomorrow? And that contract is what's protecting you. Thank you.
And that's another reason why we definitely, Mimi's spot on. Another reason why we chose to do that too is some of us had great managers and some of us really didn't. And so for those of us who don't, you get protection and you get backing from a union that you don't get. And you're able to do your job a lot better when you know you're protected. So 100%.
John, why don't you share with us why you think library workers should organize a union?
I definitely I think pretty much any and every job should have a union, but most important, one of the key things is your voice. Without a union, you don't have a voice. It'd be me just going to meeting right now and you just see my mouth moving, but you won't hear anything. The union helps you have that voice. It helps you have that support when it's time for collective bargaining, negotiating a contract, and even filing a grievance or even going on strike if need be. That union is your backbone, not just your voice, is your backbone, because without it, you can't stand alone. A lot of managers will try to even side bargaining with you, but with their union, they have to bargain with everyone, just not an individual. So it's very important to have a union because without it, you know, America wouldn't be able to run around. I mean, America wouldn't go around. I mean, what makes America what it is today is the union. I mean, without it, we wouldn't be here when we have some of the things that we have today because again, that contract gives you job security. A lot of people want the wages and the health insurance, but you also, number one key thing is that job security, because when a city, state, or any type of government agency or any job decide to have cutbacks, you have that contract, which give you job security and recall rights to your positions and things like that. Again, the unions is just as important as breathing, if you ask me, because again, without it, you won't have no backbone and you won't have no voice. So you definitely need the union. And I'm glad with AFSCME, we have them both.
I am too. And I want to, I think your point about having a voice and a say in the matter is so key. And so I think that leads into our next question really well, which is I'm going to direct at Mimi. And I want to know is how your union at your library in Bloomington was able to use your voices and advocate during COVID over this past year and address those health and safety issues.
Sure. If any of you are watching that weren't in the state of Illinois, you may have gone through something similar when the orders came to shut down. They were very sudden, and some of us got up and walked off from our desk and we didn't come back for months. And some people did have to start coming back. And of course, there really was no set rules of how do we deal with this? How do we go forward? What do we need to be safe? So we as a union came together and had Zoom calls where all of the members could put forth, okay, this is what we need in order to come back. When we started hearing that people are going to start coming back a little bit at a time, we want lots of different security measures that weren't being talked about at the administrative level. We were able to get things done. We said we wanted a temperature taking station, which was we accomplished. We wanted a dashboard so we knew when folks did become sick, and we wanted to be able to know when we had to if someone in our workspace gets sick, what do? We wanted protocols laid out so everyone was on the same page. We all knew how to respond safely. We wanted plexiglass installed along all the public service points, and we got all of that as well. At the end, we had a 7-page list of health and safety requests. I'm saying request because it really wasn't a request, right? That we needed in order to come back. And we achieved every single one of those things. And I really think that was because we had the voice, as John said, we're not alone. It wasn't me walking into an office saying, well, I think that the library needs plexiglass shields and public service stations. It was all of us that are on the front lines and people in the back lines too, all need these things in order not only to keep ourselves safe, but the community safe as well. It's important to the library workers that the people come in know that we're taking their health safely. We wanted to know what are the most up-to-date protocols on quarantining materials. How should we be handling things? Because we want the public to know we take their health just as safe, just as strongly as our own health. We were looking out for them as well. And I believe that point really hit home to administration. And like I said, because they knew that these suggestions were coming from a large group of us, we were able to get every single thing achieved.
That's amazing. And I love hearing about that story because it's such an excellent example of like using your collective voice in a really stressful time, in a really quick moving time, but also in how our union was able not only to benefit the employees of the library, but benefit the community too, because that's what those safety measures also did, was make sure that your community felt safe coming to the library. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mimi. One thing that has been apparent over the past year, particularly, and in other financial crises, is that often the employees that are hit first are our part-time employees. And in many places, they're the ones who have the least amount of protections. And so, John, I know at the Chicago Public Library, your local has done a lot of work to increase the benefits and protections for part-time employees. Could you tell us more about what all you have done to benefit part-timers?
Well, one of the things I can say that we was able to accomplish in this last contract negotiations in our current contract is that we were able to get sick time for part-timers. And one of the things that we're going to be fighting for our next contract negotiations is to get them health insurance. It's very important because during this time when the pandemic hit, a lot of our part-timers didn't have health insurance. The full-timers did, but the part-timers didn't. But that is one of the things that we did. Also, as collectively as a union, what we did for our part-timers, that we knew that the part-timers were at one point getting extra hours. So our local collectively actually sent all our part-timers a check to help them out during those times as well. But the main thing that we're going to be looking for to try to get is health insurance. Is very important. I know it's going to be an uphill battle and it's going to be a struggle, but I believe if we collectively get this, we can get it and get all our part-timers health insurance, and they have sick time. So the main thing that we did get right now was sick time for them, which they earn as they work. But the key thing that we definitely want to go forth in case anything happened like this again, they can have some type of health insurance and something to look forward to, because a lot of them are not just single, they are single parents. Those of them have kids. So it's definitely hard for them, but at least they did have sick time that they was able to use. But the key thing that they definitely need is health insurance. So, but we helped them a little bit as far as getting them a check to help sustain with the situation that they did. Because when we were shut down, we were still getting paid, which was a good thing, because during the shutdown, a lot of people didn't get paid while they was off. But we were getting paid, but their checks was a lot shorter because they were only getting paid just the 20 hours. So that was a boost that tried to help them out, and a lot of them appreciated it and liked it. So again, the next thing that we will be fighting for in our next contract negotiations is health insurance.
I think that's amazing to hear. And health insurance is such a big fight, and it's going to be so important for those part-timers. So we're all standing behind you and hoping that that can happen. And I know
Thank you.
as a former part-time librarian myself, a library worker, I remember that stress of not being able to have that that time, like not being able to feel like I couldn't take care of myself because I had to go into work. And John, I'm going to ask you a follow-up because a participant today asked in the chat whether it was paid sick time for part-time workers. Could you expand on whether it was
Yes.
paid sick time?
So it is paid sick time that they earn. Like a full-timers, I think our full-timers, we earn 1 day a month. Our part-timers earn them as they work. So the amount of hours they work is calculated of how much they receive in paid sick time. So that's what they did. And it's definitely a good benefit because when I started back in 1993, I think my salary was $585 and there was no sick time. So, and I had a child. So it was a struggle. So if my child got sick, I had to take off for work or either try to use vacation time. So that took away from something else. But right now, yes, as they work, they earn their sick time.
That's awesome, and a huge win and benefit for
Yes,
your
yes.
fellow members and workers at the Chicago Public Library. So as union members, we work to lift up everyone and make sure that everyone has a better chance to move forward and make their lives better. And a huge part of that is making sure that we are bargaining with equity and fairness in mind and making sure that our fights are lifting up all people. And so, Kelly, I'd like to hear a little bit from you on, I know the MIT union is new, and I'm wondering if you would be able to share what you've been able to do so far to address equity and fairness in your library.
Absolutely. I will say that since we are in the process of negotiating our first contract right now, that I can't speak on specifics about our contract. However, we have been able, we are negotiating absolutely with equity, fairness, and an understanding of that we are working within a system that is a system of oppression. The academy is absolutely a system of oppression. And so we are working with an understanding that we are coming place. So we have been able to get gains and equity and fairness and understanding of where we're coming from has absolutely played into that. And a lot of it is around some of the return to campus, return to services, and COVID. Most of the folks who do that work, the frontline work, are folks who are at the bottom of the pay scale. They're folks who don't own their homes, live out, and are having to commute on public transit in order to deal with a situation where they're dealing with items that might have to worry about quarantine, fomate transmission, and all of the things associated with that. And we were initially in dealing with a situation where we were sort of handed a return to work proposal by folks in leadership who don't really know how the work is done. And so that was when we as a unit were able to step forward and say, actually, no, we're the ones who know how to do this. We are a unit. We are working together, and we are going to step forward and say it is appropriate for us, not only because the workflow needs to be different, but we need to be able to be sure that we have appropriate ventilation, that we need to be able to be on work rotations that have us in place for the right amount of time. And we brought up a lot of issues that previously, if there wasn't an us, would have been one or two people at a time walking into an office or a virtual Zoom office and bringing up issues that would have been swatted away. And so that really brought the health and safety and fairness of who was on campus when front and center. And it was a huge win. It was a huge, huge win for us. And we felt like we were able to, come to the table and have a conversation instead of receiving instruction and just having to do something. And that's a part of being a union. You have a voice in how things get done.
Exactly. And it's really great to hear that, like, even as you are still in this process of getting your first contract, that you've still been able to fight and get progress and improve things within your libraries already as a union.
Yes,
Really
absolutely.
to hear. John, I would like to also send this question your way. What has your local at the Chicago Public Library been able to do to address equity and fairness?
Well, we've had a lot of battles. One, I can tell you one that really sticks out that we recently was able to get was dealing with when management decided to regrade a lot of our librarians, which are branch managers, who were actually L3s. They regraded them to L4s, but they didn't do certain ones. They didn't do any of the African Americans and some brown. They didn't regrade them. Their excuse was that their branches were too small or whatever the case may be. And we filed a grievance. And one of the things that I did bring up to management, that it's against their basic human and civil rights. Equal work deserves equal pay. So it doesn't matter if the library is 1,000 square feet versus 10,000 square feet. They're doing the same job. So I did threaten them that it was they're violating their basic human and civil rights. And I also talked to the branch managers, and we were kind of prepared. I was preparing them if in case they would need to go to see EEO. So they were prepared to do that if needed be. But management came back and they regraded them. They regraded them all to L4s, which was a good thing because they knew that they were doing something wrong. You can't, if everybody is doing the same job, then they deserve the same pay. Doesn't matter what size library they're in. So that was one of the things that we won, and it felt good because not only we won it, that they regraded them, they also gave them back pay as well. So that was one of our biggest good fights as me being president that we able to do, because it was, basic civil and human rights violation. They never should have done that, but we did it and we won it.
That's a huge fight and a huge win. Thank you for sharing it with us. Continuing on this vein of specific things that you've won and victories that you've gotten, I want to hear from Mimi for a minute or two on something that you've won in your contract or working within your local that you're really excited or proud about.
I think if you were to ask anyone in our local what our most recent big win is, and that's something everyone's always excited about, is it came to our attention during bargaining time that every other city employee had the day after Thanksgiving off as a holiday, except for the library. The library was the only city building still open the day after Thanksgiving. So we took that to the table and we had to fight for that. And in the end, we won that. So we now all have an additional day off from our contract. And when people try to tell me, like, what has the union done for me? I'm like, oh, well, you have an extra day off every year. Thank you. You're very welcome, in a joking way, of course. But it's like an actual tangible proof of how we work to make people's lives better, how we're working to make sure people have a better work-life balance. And also that fairness, that all city employees should have the same benefits as just one branch shouldn't get special privileges and special days off. So I know that everyone's very excited to see what we can accomplish in 2022 when our contract is ready to be renegotiated. And this is an exciting time right now because when we're in between contract, I'm actively seeking out input from members. What can we do better? What can we improve on? What's our next step? Because as all of you know, there's always something better that we can add to the next contract.
Always something better. Like, that's what progress is. You keep moving forward. But man, the day after Thanksgiving, that's such a huge win. Like, that's my favorite holiday of the year, really, and being able to have that off is just amazing. Kelly, what about you? Any wins or things that you've gotten already as a union member that you want to share?
Well, obviously, again, same caveat applies in terms of bargaining and the things we're bargaining for. It's going to sound kind of warm and fuzzy, but probably, at least from my perspective, the greatest thing we've got so far is that a disparate group of people who don't all work together, banded together, and we talk to each other about all kinds of things, and we've become a force and a family. And that sounds silly, but it's together. And when you're not working together for the greater good, and that's a huge win in and of itself, is knowing that your colleagues have got your back and that your council has your back. That's a huge win in and of itself. Another big win about things that we have not had conversations about before. So the discussions about things that need to change, managers that might need attention, things that one person might not know because they don't work in a particular area, those conversations are being surfaced. One of the things that is our guiding tenet is radical transparency in everything we do, because that's not how our management works. And so, we're setting up how we want things to work for the future, and setting an example for those who manage us. And it's working. So it's not maybe as a concrete a win as what I was just talking about with the changes with COVID and coming back on campus, but which is a win in and of itself. But the way we're working together as colleagues has fundamentally changed. And we're also looking for the future and saying, we're laying the groundwork for the people who are going to have these jobs in 20 years, in 30 years. And that's really important for us too. So that's big, that's important.
Hey, Jane, I may want to add as well, one of the other things that we want in our contract that we have now is paid parental leave, which I was able to take advantage of myself because my wife and we had a baby. So we both had paid parental leave, which was good. I mean, it usually in the past, when you just take the parental leave, it was unpaid, but we now currently have paid parental leave. So that's one of the good things I can tell you. That's another thing that we won as far as within our current contract was a good thing. And also we have something added to that is if you are in the deferred compensation plan added with our pension, the city is matching that for dollar. For the previous year was 250, this year is 250, and the next year is 500, which can go towards health insurance for those when you retire. So those who are just getting hired with CPL, which is Chicago Public Library, can have that opportunity once if they join it now. And if we can continue to get this, so by the time they get ready to retire in 20 or 30 years, they would have enough money, more than enough money to have for health insurance when they retire. So those were a couple of the wins that we have in our current contract that definitely helped us out.
Those are huge wins. And I feel like all of the things that you three just shared are such game changers in how people can go about through their days. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're coming to a close with our time with the three of you, but I wanted to see if any of you had any last thoughts that you wanted to share before we move on to the next point in our night tonight.
Sure, I can share. I think, especially those who are non-union right now, and if you guys are thinking about organizing, you should definitely do it. It would be if you come with AFSCME, you would definitely have the support that you would need and the education that can help train you and guide you in the right direction. Many other unions, and I'm not going to name any names, but with AFSCME, you are you are your union. So you're on the front line with your co-brothers and sisters. You're not calling someone to come out to represent you if you have a pre-dis. You're there on the front lines. You know what's going on. You're able to have labor management meetings with your city officials and administrators. So I think you definitely should have a union. Again, because the main thing is you be able to have a voice. Right now, I know for those who don't have, it's a struggle, but once you get that union card and you're paying them dues, it's a breath of relief that you can now kind of relax a little bit and now get ready to form and be that join this big body that we have. So that's what I can say.
All right. Well, I think that is an excellent note to end on. Thank you so much to John, Mimi, and Kelly for sharing tonight. Appreciate the time and all the effort you put in both into this webinar, but then also all the work you put in your libraries with your locals. You are changing lives and we appreciate you. So, but now you all can go ahead and turn off your cameras and we will move on, see you later, to the next point in our night. We will be hearing from Linda Bennett, who is a legislative affairs specialist with AFSCME International Union. Linda advocates for working people at the federal level and takes members' concerns to Congress. She has a JD and specializes in legislative dealing with both library and museum workers, as well as she's the lead on our healthcare legislative fights. And she's currently advocating in support of the Build America's Libraries Act, as well as legislation to improve the cost of prescription drugs. So Linda is going to share some updates of some of the work she's been fighting for on behalf of our members. And I will we'll hand it off to you, Linda.
Thank you, Jane. My work and the effective power I have as a lobbyist for AFSCME comes from our members and their collective power and voice. AFSCME members, we fought very hard to get Congress to include $350 billion worth of state and local aid in the American Rescue Plan. By fought and fight, I mean AFSCME members came together in a coordinated effort to amplify their voice through calls, emails, and virtual meetings with members of Congress and their staff that got the needed funding. For the state of Illinois, this victory means an infusion of $13.7 billion in new federal funds. For Illinois counties, $2.5 billion. We fought and won to keep these funds flexible so they can be used to stop furloughs, hire new staff, help workers deliver the services our communities need. These funds specifically will mean Cook County will get $998.8 million. That's nearly $1 billion. Chicago will get a separate $1.9 billion, and Mimi, McLean County is going to get $33 million, and your town of Bloomington will get $13.9 million. DuPage County, $178.9 million. Will County, $133 million. Just as AFSCME advocated for those funds, Council 13 has a team of lobbyists that work to make sure state lawmakers, as well as county and local government officials, hear the collective voice of AFSCME members and how to use those funds to support. Council 31, sorry, I'm a little nervous. Collective voices of AFSCME members on how to use these funds to support the needs of the community. In addition to the $350 billion, we pressed for an additional $200 million in new federal funds through a formula grant, so every state would get some, dedicated to libraries, because we understood what Mimi said, that libraries are often the first to be cut. We did this work in coalitions and partnered with key allies like the American Library Association. We lobbied for this funding based upon the priorities of our membership. Illinois' allocation for this new funding that's for libraries is $4.74 million. While these targeted funds can't be used for salaries or wages, you can use them for programmatic costs. So that means if you don't have to divert funds away from staff to fund the programmatic costs, you still have more money for staff. Generally, these funds can be used in the same way that the Library Services and Technology Act grants to states programs works, but we made sure that the American Rescue Plan funds are different from those grants in one really important way. We repeatedly told Congress, look, these dedicated library funds must not require a state match because states are losing revenue. And we did it because we knew some states are not going to access that funds if they had to pay a share. And we were successful. Just as we advocated for at the federal level for this important provision, the team of lobbyists at Council 31 are monitoring how the state agency is going to distribute that money to libraries across the state, what process they're going to have, what applications, and this information will arm AFSCME locals with the information they need to come together to fight for the things that make an impact and the shared vision of improving services for the community. The other funds I want to highlight that matter to library that were in the American Rescue Plan are the Emergency Connectivity Fund. That provides $7.2 billion for schools and libraries to purchase and provide internet connectivity to students without a home connection. This is a huge game changer for underserved students and families who do not have access to the internet, because now they can get a portable hotspot from their library. And we know this is an important thing for libraries to do to improve equity in our communities. The $270 million in new federal funding for the National Endowment for Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities will help museums and libraries recover from the economic burdens of the pandemic. Importantly, it will help support the retention of staff at these cultural institutions. For those of you who work at a college or university libraries, like Kelly, the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund in the American Rescue Plan provides $36 billion for your institutions. So we are now focusing, now that that has passed, we are focusing on federal spending bills for the fiscal year 2022, which starts for the federal government at the end of September. And we're also looking at the infrastructure and jobs proposal. Congress is in the process of beginning to develop these important bills. By develop, I mean they're not public, yet they're not drafted. So our union is working to raise up and amplify the voices of our members about the importance of increasing funds for libraries. For fiscal year 2021, the library grant formula provided Illinois with nearly $5.6 million, but it required a state match of those funds of $2.8 million. But we recognize what Illinois got was not enough. We need to get back to the high watermark for national funding of $213.5 million. And that was passed in Congress for FY 2010. So we're working along with the American Library Association, calling for more than $206 million for this grant fund. With regard to the infrastructure, we're looking at the realization that the average library was built 40 years ago. It's in their need of repair, renovation, and modernization. The pandemic has highlighted how important strong HVAC systems are for reducing the spread of infectious diseases. We're urging Congress to include the Build America's Library Act, which is S-127, and in the House, it's called HR 1581 as its bill number, but they're known as the Build America's Library Act, into this infrastructure and jobs legislative package. This would provide $5 billion in new federal construction funds for libraries over 3 years for states. These funds can be used for a range of needed building changes, from ramps to make libraries more accessible, to installing improved Wi-Fi, or abating asbestos or other toxic substances that may be at a library building. And the lobbyist from the American Library Association has teamed up with me to urge offices. We do meetings together to include this funding in the infrastructure package, in large part because AFSCME's political clout gets better responses to meeting requests. Council 31 is monitoring the efforts of the state to develop the needed state plan to tap into those funds should Congress include this targeted money for libraries. In addition to keeping an eye on developing legislation to help our members as part of my job, I also make sure members of Congress recognize, understand, and value the important work you do. And here is an example of that work.
Hi, it's Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky on Library Workers' Day. I am a huge fan of not only libraries, but also of AFSCME. And I want to thank you for all you do. I think we're at a period now where people are really starting to understand what public service workers are doing for our country. And libraries have always been there for us, and actually are more than ever required. Now with all the internet and broadband, libraries play a bigger role, I think, than ever before in our history. And librarians are so incredibly important, and all the staff that works at libraries. I myself, and through my office, have really taken advantage of the venue of a library. And I think, thank goodness for libraries for giving us the space to meet constituents. We have office hours in libraries. We've had town hall meetings in the libraries. It's also always been a very welcoming venue and adds to the civic education that libraries provide. We often have to fight, especially under the Republicans, for budgets to make sure that libraries are recognized for the essential role, not just important role, but essential role in our community. So I thank you so very much for what you do. And I think as soon as all the libraries open all the doors, that people are just going to rush in. Hopefully some of you are already back at work. I hope you all have gotten the personal protective equipment, the PPE. I know that you've advocated to make sure that your workers are safe, and we are so appreciative of all you do. So happy Library Worker Day. Glad to participate.
Thank you, Linda. And give me a moment, and I'm going to drop in the chat links and summaries of the information that Linda just shared with us. Information about all the different bills, and then also if you're interested in finding out more about the different funding breakdowns, you can access them through those links in the chat. So we've been receiving questions tonight throughout the night through the chat and then through the registration prior to tonight. And so we're going to take some time now at the end of this hour to answer those questions. And so Linda, if you could come back for a quick moment, because this first question is for you. And the participant asked, my county is getting a lot of money through the American Rescue Plan. Can you explain a little more what this money could be used for?
Thank you. That's a great question. We pressed Congress to make that state and local aid be flexible. It could be used to stop furloughs and make other investments in workers. With a union, you and your coworkers can come together to advance a shared vision of how can that money be best used to serve the community. That's why we made it flexible.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Appreciate you and everything you do for us all the time. So I'm going to take the next question, which is, what do you do if your library board or your board of trustees, your decision makers do not support or understand the work that you do in your day-to-day at your library? Well, as AFSCME members, we work to make sure that our libraries are supportive of our members and our communities. And that makes sure that the library board is comprised of individuals that support our overall goals. A library board that doesn't understand what we do in our day-to-day makes it really, really hard for us to serve our community in the ways that our community needs. If they're not understanding the work we do and they think we're just, for example, a warehouse for books, the support we're going to receive from them is going to reflect that, and it's going to make us harder for us to do our jobs. That's why AFSCME members work to ensure that the library board is not only reflective of the communities, but it's reflective of the staff's needs. We take part in ensuring that that happens through the election process. In many library districts throughout the state of Illinois, the board of trustees are elected by the people through the ballot box. Recently, AFSCME members at one of our newest AFSCME locals at Oak Lawn Public Library did exactly this. They took part in the recent library board election that just happened a few weeks ago and were able to get 2 new board members elected. Traditionally, this was an election that had low turnout. This is often the library board trustees election is the one where you flip your ballot over and you're like, oh, there's a trustee election. I wonder who I'm going to vote for. But AFSCME members at Oak Lawn were able to drive out a high number of voters to support the library. They were able to put in people who use the library, who care about the library, and who are invested in making sure that the people who are providing those services feel supported in their day-to-day, particularly now after the last year that we've had. The local at the Oak Lawn Public Library is one of our newest locals, as I mentioned. They don't even have a contract in place yet, and yet they were already able to come together and take action that improves the library for everyone in their community. Like how Kelly was explaining earlier in our panel with how MIT has already experienced change and progress before their contract is in place, Oak Lawn Public Library workers were able to do the exact same thing. So I hope that answers your question. It's a fight, but it's a good fight, and it's a fight that can really affect your community. I'm going to look through some of the questions and see which question we're going to do next. So give me one moment. So our final question of the night is going to be, I know someone at an unorganized library who could benefit from having a union. What should I do? That's an excellent question, and I'm so glad you're here so we can answer that. So if you know someone who works at an unorganized library, or you are someone who works at an unorganized library, I would reach out to your friends, to your colleagues, and ask them how they're doing and how things are going at work as a way just to feel them out. Sometimes when work is hard, people just need to vent and they need to feel heard. And that's really the first step to making them feel like they have a say in matters, is that someone is actually listening to the things that they're saying and their concerns. If they bring up issues around low wages or disrespect, long hours, they've tried to get a Saturday off so they could go see their kid play soccer and they can't ever get the Saturday off. Or even concerns like a bad or not great board, like what the Oak Lawn library workers had. Just casually ask them, what would it be like if you had a seat at the table, if you had a say in the process, if it was a conversation between people on how policies were going to end up, and not just edicts from management on the way things were going to be? How would that feel? How would your working life and your personal life change if you had a say in the process? And if they say that would be great, that would be amazing, then you say, great, I can put you in contact with the people who can help make that happen. because that's what we're here for tonight. And I'm actually, with that in mind, I'm going to drop another link into the chat that, once my mouse decides to work, I'm going to put another link into the chat that will send you to a form that you can fill that out. If you are feeling like, I want a seat at the table, I want to say in what my working conditions and my work life looks like, fill out this form and someone can reach out to you and start having that conversation and making sure that you and your coworkers feel heard. So I want to say thank you to Linda Bennett for presenting, and our wonderful panel of library members, Mimi Davis, John Rayburn, and Kelly Hopkins. We're incredibly appreciative of all the time that you've put into tonight to talk with us and share your experiences with us. And like I said earlier, for all the work that you're doing in your locals, you're making real change, and we appreciate you for that. Again, if you are interested in learning more about how to form a union at your library, please fill out the form that I put into the chat. But otherwise, thank you for giving up part of your Friday night to spend with us and to learn more about unions in libraries. I hope you all have an excellent evening and a good weekend. Bye all.